Meow. Meow. Meow.
After walking a circle around Hyrule, there were several suggestions for other shapes to attempt. However, before that video was launched, I already had some ideas of what shape would be next. The Triforce is an iconic symbol of the Legend of Zelda series, but it's barely noticeable in the Tears of the Kingdom gameplay. So what better way to pay tribute to the eternal struggle that defines the saga than to draw a massive Triforce on the Tears of the Kingdom map. Just like with the giant circle, I started by using the Tears of the Kingdom Object Map to draw the largest Triforce that was possible in Hyrule. The single path measured over 39 kilometers in length and promised some new challenges that I didn't have to deal with when drawing my circle. Given the significance of the Triforce in the Legend of Zelda series, I decided to draw the symbol using the cleanest map possible. That meant I had to start from a new game and carefully avoid the surface level as much as possible while collecting all of the Skyview towers, the climbing set with 1 level of upgrade, the Zora set with 2 levels of upgrade, clothes for cold temperatures, clothes for hot temperatures, stamina food, heart food, auto build, battery upgrades, Zonai charges and devices, and, most importantly, 15 shrines and the Hero's Path mode. Since obtaining the Hero's Path mode was one of the last items on the checklist, I held my breath as I opened my map to see exactly how much I avoided navigating the surface. Wow, that is so clean. With a shockingly clean map ready to go, it was time to start the drawing. I started my journey north of Typhlo Ruins with the Triforce of Power and used a similar method to what I used for my circle walk to once again cross the mud surrounding the ruins. Not long after I passed the ruins, I arrived at my first real obstacle of the challenge, Korok Forest. There was no way to go through the forest without getting captured, so I needed to delicately balance going over the forest while not touching the sky level of the map. I narrowly avoided getting captured by the forest and somehow completed the crossing on my first try, even if the result wasn't exactly perfectly straight. I then continued across the southwest part of Eldin to the Zora River and tried to navigate the swift current a couple of times before opting for an easier, dry crossing. Next up was the Bonnet Pond area and Rutala River before I found myself sneaking by a blue-maned Lionel thanks to a very well-placed piece of rubble. From there, I continued across Lanayru Heights, Lanayru Promenade, Lanayru Bluff, the Peak of Awakening, and Nervada Lake before reaching Hateno. And the only shrine that ended up being on my path, Zanmik Shrine. That brought me to Kitano Bay and Necluda Sea, which were a real problem. The water offered few, if any, landmarks I could use, so I mostly had to rely on a single marker and cross-checking coordinates with Object Map as I swam across the sea. After a few tries, I eventually made it to the first corner of the Triforce. Next up was the bottom of the Triforce, which seemed simple because I just had to maintain Link's Y coordinate at -3950. However, doing that for such a long period of time proved to require much more concentration than I expected. And then came another issue with the southern edge of the world. Just like my circle, I didn't realize I had included an out-of-bounds area in my drawing. But, with apologies to Princess Zelda, I decided to keep going and trimmed just a bit off the bottom of the Triforce of Wisdom as a nod to my own lack of wisdom and planning. Next up was the Gerudo Desert, which wasn't a problem until my map turned to static. Thankfully, I still had coordinates available on my display, and I was eventually able to reach the second corner of the Triforce. With a bit more coordinates-only wandering, I continued to the Desert Rift, and then the Great Cliffs area, where my map was finally restored. From there, I climbed over Safia's Table and Laparo Mesa to reach Satori Mountain. A little bit before I got to the northern edge of Satori Mountain, I reached the midpoint of the left side of the Triforce, and I turned to fill in the middle. Just like the bottom line, I had to maintain Link's Y coordinate at -150, which again proved to be a bit more challenging than I anticipated, particularly in the rivers. Crossing the middle of Hyrule was otherwise fairly uneventful, and I soon turned toward Kakariko Village to work on completing the lower right Triforce of Courage. On my way to Kakariko, I suddenly realized I would not be able to cross the ring ruins because it was still locked behind several quests. Thankfully, my path barely slipped past the locked off area before continuing through the rest of the village. After crossing Lake Sela, I made my way up the northern side of Dueling Peaks, then down into Dueling Peaks Pass, then back up the southern side of Dueling Peaks, and on to the Spring of Courage area. I continued across Farron past the Highland Stable area and back to the Farron Sea, where I once again had to rely on a single marker in the water to complete the Triforce of Courage. Next, it was time to finish up the lower left Triforce of Wisdom, and I walked along the western shoreline of Lake Hylia to Great Plateau. With a quick dash past a Boss Boko and his Boko friends, I continued over the old Shrine of Resurrection towards Hopper Pond, and I quickly realized that I did not take into account the locations of Gloomhands during my planning. Thankfully, the northwestern edge of Great Plateau was not too far away, and I barely managed to escape. From there, I climbed over Outskirt Stable and had a pretty straightforward path back to the northern edge of Satori Mountain. Finally, I was down to the last segment for the Triforce of Power and the entire Triforce. After an agonizing wait for the rain to subside on the northern bank of the Tamio River, I was finally able to climb up the southern side of the West Hyrule Plains and continue my trek through the Breach of Demise, North Hyrule Plain, and Solari Plain. From there, I went up and over Mount Drenna and had another uneventful walk across West Deplian Badlands. Well, uneventful until some Stallcoblins decided to join me for the very last few meters of my challenge. With the Stallcoblins permanently removed from the celebration, it was time to see the results of my over 24 hours of work.